What industry is slowly dying? Story 1. Artisanal repair, like leather repair, shoe repair, seamstress clothing repair. Combination of no young people learning the skill taking over businesses and proliferation of fast fashion, just like small electronics repair before it. Edit. Forgot to mention rising commercial rents, the bane of many small businesses. Answer. I feel so lucky living in my hipster city. I can, or could until recently, reasonably walk to my choice of cobblers, VCR and record player repairmen, and the local typewriter shop. I have a talented neighbor who fixes my knit sweaters, one who crafts leather goods, and a new photo development lab literally down the road. My husband works next to a full animal butcher shop. The florist we hired for our wedding grows all her own flowers across town. One of our best kitchen knives was hand-forged by a classmate. It's magical. Story 2. Ironically, I heard casket sales were slowing because of innovations in cremation or other burial services like being buried in a tree. Answer. For us, it was buying a casket, a burial plot, and cost of the service rent of the funeral home costing more than a new car these days. Not many of us have that kind of cash on hand. Cremating is much cheaper, and you can theoretically be scattered anywhere you want. River, island, personal hunting property, garden, mountaintop, over the bridge on the interstate, on top of commuting traffic on I-85, etc. Story 3. In Korea, the private education industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry. The birth rate is so low, although it's starting to reverse slowly, is still far from sustaining a population. I try to keep track of student data in my area. In a span of 5 years, I saw enrollment drop to just one new student last year at the local public school, and I am in a city that is about 1.4 million people. There are enclaves of families trying to pool in certain areas so their kids can grow up with other kids. But many areas are just aging out, causing massive drops in enrollment from kindergarten to university levels. And families will literally uproot just so their kid can go to an area with more families and functioning schools. Answer. That boggles my mind. My town in Canada has so many kids in each school. The teachers are currently in strike because they said it's too many for one person. 35 elementary school kids to one person, when childcare can't have more than 6 to 12 kids depending on age, lots of big families, my neighbor has 5, lots immigrant families. Population has exploded in the last 10 years. Story 4. Customer service. You thought getting a human on the phone was difficult in 2025? By 2035, agentic AI will make sure no human customer service exists. Answer. Just yesterday, I ordered a shirt online. Shortly after, I realized I ordered the wrong thing and hurried to cancel it. They make you go through this AI chatbot. I proceeded to throw a hissy fit and curse at this AI because it kept sending me in circles. I told it that it was useless and everything wrong with this world, etc. Things I would never ever say to a real person. Eventually, it asked if I want to raise a support ticket to cancel the item. Yes, please. So it did that. To my embarrassment, it attached the entire chat log to my cancellation ticket. The actual human that canceled. The order must have read the chat log because they gave me tips on how to avoid frustration next time. What used to be a simple button click in the good old days turned into a 30-minute ordeal that made me want to throw the computer out the window. Story 5. After 25 years in the Hollywood film industry, I've only worked about 2 months in the past. 12 years. Story 6. TV film writing. I had a 20-year career that has all but ended, and am far from the only one. The studio streamers are making fewer and fewer shows, which have fewer and fewer seasons with fewer and fewer episodes. Used to be an actual career, now it's a hobby for the rich. Answer. Lump in the whole industry, at least in the US right now. Below-the-line crew positions have dried up in not just film and TV, but commercial as well. I used to do like 3 features a year and then have a bunch of commercials in between to tide me over. Companies have stopped hiring my position on commercials, just have a producer or PA do it, and features are few and far between. Story 7. In 10-20 years, you'll have a teacher crisis. Unless you're from upper-class money, you're not paying $80K for college to earn $50K a year to teach kids. Answer: there is already a teacher crisis in some areas. I am in SE, Louisiana, and I was a teacher here for 16 years. Education in this state is awful. I live in a district that has money, and it is still terrible. The good teachers are dropping like flies. I was one of them. I needed out of the toxic work environment that pitted us against each other in order to shame us into producing test scores and work every evening and weekend without pay just to keep up with demands. I was certainly not paid enough, and after 16 years and earning a master's degree, I was only making a few thousand more a year than when I started. And if I wanted more money, I had to produce test scores. Everything rides on that stupid test for those babies and the faculty. There are positions that haven't been filled by a certified candidate for years because there isn't anyone applying that is qualified, especially special education positions. Story 8. Cable TV. Like, who is still out here paying $80 a month to scroll past 900 channels of nothing? It's like a blockbuster that refuses to believe the internet happened. Every year they raise prices and act shocked when more people leave. It's the Sears of entertainment. Answer: maybe it was because I grew up just before cable started going downhill, but I feel that there was something to be said about appointment viewing. Don't have to worry as much about spoilers since seasons didn't drop all at once, and how some programs were water cooler shows, which comprised a shared cultural experience due to their broad appeal. Now we have countless shows which appeal to our niche interests, which makes them more engaging to us, but means we have fewer people to share them with in broader society. Cable combined with on-demand content could have held out longer if it didn't go down the in-shitification route of putting crap reality shows and endless reruns on every channel, but I'm sure the shareholders made it out nicely while they could. Story 9. Independent pharmacies. Insurance reimbursements are regularly at a negative margin, so pharmacies are dispensing substances at a lower cost than they pay for them. The independents will be out of business first, but if PBM reform doesn't happen soon, pharmacy as we know it will be gone within 15 years at the outside. Story 10. Farming. Not the industry itself, but the amount of people involved. Farms and equipment have gotten so big. Small farm towns are disappearing fast. Answer: small farms are often disappearing because of their owners. Look at the US. They voted overwhelmingly for Trump, who started a trade war. A huge amount of agriculture was exported. Before his first term, US was a net food exporter. By 2019, it was breaking even. Now, net importing. Add in the anti-immigrant stance, and ratcheting up deportations, and their labor force is shrinking. Crops literally rotting in fields. Big farms and corporate-backed ones have greater resources. They can access credit more easily and weather the storm a lot better than your local farmer can. The US has more farmland than it needs to feed itself. If farmers want to stay in business, let alone grow and be secure, exports are essential, as are public investments. Lots of countries cannot feed themselves and would love to import more to bring food prices down. Problem is, farmers keep voting for people that hurt their industry. A lot of countries have restrictions on U.S. food exports not as a punitive measure, but because they don't meet their health and safety standards. Ranchers and other livestock farmers struggle because over-underbidding due to consolidation in the meatpacking industry. Rural. Services like internet are often pricier because of local monopolies or duopolies if they are properly served at all. Medical services are more expensive for similar reasons and thus make the money necessary to cover bills higher. Everything from infrastructure investments to trade policy to immigration to antitrust policy to health policy. They tend to vote R because they choose social conservatism over economic opportunity. Not all of them do, but 70 do. We saw the head of the Soybean Farmer Association say he voted Trump, beg him to change his mind on tariffs, a thing he's supported, for 40 years, and then say he'd vote for him again and has no regrets. Then they get mad at government, aka Democrats, without a hint of irony given how many farmers depend on federal subsidies and crop insurance programs. There's problems with large consolidated farms, but I'm so sick of small farmers at this point. They create and compound their own problems, then beg the government for a handout, all while pretending they're salt of the earth, independent people. Story 11. Auto racing. Racetracks are closing all over the country. The pressure is coming from all sides too. There are far fewer hobby racers than there used to be as the raw material dries up and racing becomes more expensive even in the entry-level classes. The land is becoming more valuable, and as we continue to build housing developments, the new homeowners complain about the noise and traffic. Spectator turnout is lower as racing, and motorsports aren't as popular in general. We'll probably have top-tier racing for the foreseeable future, but it's dying at the grassroots level. Answer: I like watching a YouTuber that does drag racing, and most of the time it just seems like he's lighting money on fire every time he races. It just seems ungodly expensive to be competitive at any speed, but even the medium-fast racers have hundreds of thousands of dollars in their cars. Their cheap car challenge was over $10K. People think photography and skiing are expensive. But when you decide to race anything with a motor, it's just an order of magnitude more. Story 12. Rigging? I'm talking about the splicing and making of the big cables type of rigging. Not a lot of skilled riggers left in my area. Story 13. Affordable restaurants. The not-for-the-wealthy, non-chain and honest sit-down sort. Diners will be gone totally in 20 years. Answer: parents own a restaurant. It's almost impossible to find the labor to actually do this kind of work. Their food is around $10 but comes at the expense of exploiting the hell out of themselves. I personally think the industry itself is delusional because people get treated poorly. Parents work 90 hours a week, 7 days, no holiday off, 365 days a year. Dine-in restaurants is terrible from an owner perspective, since my parents are friends with some families that own sit-down and nicer restaurants, but they are getting takedown in labor quality, cost, and the volume isn't enough to sustain how big floor plans are. A mixed-use development next to me has 7 leases available, all from shuttered restaurants in the past 5 months. I understand the appeal of these businesses, but they're just fundamentally terrible for everyone involved. That's why you always hear jokes about restaurants and making money, because they don't. I applaud anyone who can keep a restaurant open for 10 years. My parents have had theirs for 28 years with me and my siblings working. Story 14. Printing business. My wife is an accountant. She moved from one company where she'd literally read from paper receipts to reading e-receipts, and now she's in a paperless accounting firm. Now, even contracts are signed electronically. Edit. Sorry everyone for extrapolating an outrageous claim from a single experience. Clearly printing is still alive and is far from dying. Answer. The printing industry as a whole is far from dying, and a lot more things are printed than people may realize. I'm currently industry adjacent, more so on the graphic design side, but work closely with a lot of large-scale print vendors, and business is booming for them. A lot of times they are so busy with client orders they have struggles keeping up with delivery deadlines. I'm in a major U.S. city that has a lot of local manufacturing plants, but also work with various print vendors across the country. However, small towns that have a mom-pop print shop for making copies and personal business cards could very well be struggling. FedEx, UPS print shops are also in this category. Story 15. AAA games. Gaming is not dying, but the big game companies are almost incapable of making a profit most of the time, with games that have too big budgets not being able to make impossible sale projections. They are trying to stem the bleed with microtransactions, but most players dislike them and are starting to push back against them. There literally is no amount of money that will make investors happy. Eventually, the bigger games bigger budget model will fail. Answer: the problem is every modern AAA AAA game is trying to make the next big open world, with realistic graphics, that people will put hundreds of hours into when they don't need to. They're all trying to copy the success of GTA 5, and they need to realize that not every game is going to be the next GTA 5. Think about modern Star Wars Outlaw, modern Assassin's Creed games, Watch Dogs, Starfield, or that new Avatar game. They didn't need to have huge open worlds which cost them a fortune. Story 16. Publishing, but not because self-publishing is taking its place, because it has all the same problems. Enshittification is making book discovery nearly impossible. Self-publishers are treading water. DIY book marketing is an absolute nightmare and a money loser for most people, but traditional publishers have no clue what to do either, because the internet's such a hostile mess. There are probably more great writers than ever, and readers almost certainly want to find them, but the systems that connect them are malfunctioning. The irony is that what will probably save us is AI, but not generative AI. Generative AI seems to be a net negative for the world, and especially the arts. We need full-text recommendation systems to replace the social proof-based ones that are extremely easy to game. Answer: it's such a shame because editing is also a thing of the past. I worked on manuscripts, mainly fiction books, for 15 years, and my dad ran a company for about 30. We didn't just line edit. We thoroughly evaluated prospective published books for readability, audience appeal, and good storytelling. Nowadays, people don't even think to shoot their manuscript by an editor. Some of the worst stuff is being thrown out there, and it's completely undeserving. AI is only going to make it harder to compete with. Only long-established authors will have an edge when it comes to putting out decent reads. Story 17. Retail pharmacy. It's pretty much moving towards being a CVS monopoly, and they only survive because of their involvement in the insurance side. Insurance companies, more accurately PBMs, have lobbied and cornered and violation pharmacies for decades now, constantly taking a greater share of the pie and effectively leaving pharmacies operating perpetually in the red. There's way more to it, but the fact is that standalone pharmacies, Rite Aid, are doomed to collapse with time. Source: am a pharmacist. Story 18. Maybe an uncommon answer: higher education, not dying, but at least will needs to be greatly transformed in the next era. Edit: got up and surprised by the number of upvotes. Share a bit of my thoughts for exchange. Higher education is not an essential need. When an industry fulfills the essential needs, it won't be dying. Don't get me wrong, learning is essential for humans, and I think primary and secondary education are essential for the general public, but higher education is not, nor is it helpful in practical aspects, like imparting the knowledge we need in daily life, like cooking, cycling, and even thinking, or making us more competent in our jobs. I will explain more later. The reason for its continued existence is the socially constructed credential justification system. In other words, the employers, strangers, or other social institutions are still using that one piece of paper as an indicator of one's competency. There are indeed correlations, but first, it is more correlation rather than causation. Second, the linkage has become weaker and weaker. Once the credential system collapses, fewer people will go on this track. We have seen the sign of it now. Also, there are so many alternatives nowadays to fulfill the needs in learning and practical aspects. The information era demolishes the moat of the university. The resources of knowledge are widespread, not to say the cost of this route compared to the others. So, maybe not happening in a short period. Higher education needs to be reformed in order to find its value in the market. Edit 2. Please notice that anti-current higher education system does not equal anti-intellectualism, even can be the opposite. Answer. College is like the military. It waxes and wanes with the times and the economy. We need loads of reform on how we get into college, pay for college, the entire predatory loan situation. Pell Grants need reform. There's too many bunk degrees from bunk colleges. I know someone that got an associate's in physical therapy, and it was like 10 multiple choice questions for their tests. Stupid easy. Educational bloat is real. The entire PhD and master's tracks have issues, but either way, there is not going to be an end in the US to American families craving an Ivy League education, college football. And if the economy takes a shoot again, suddenly everyone will either join the service or go to college. 80 of my graduating class went to college because we were right in the midst of the Great Recession. 60 of those kids grabbed student loan debt, did a year, and either washed out or ran out of money. Higher education and how poorly any of us kids were guided toward a more fruitful decision is why the chickens have come home to roost. They've also been like any other government-subsidized program. They gouge. America is pay to win, though. Even getting decent vocational training in a time when the trades are still heavily in demand is expensive, and the gatekeeping across all forms of education, in the form of money, keeps a lot of people out of upward mobility. Story 19. Trucking. Over the next 10 years, more and more trucks will be self-driving. Pepsi is already using them for short-haul trips in Southern California. There's just too much money to be made. Answer. Over the next 10 years, more and more trucks will be self-driving. Remember hearing that 10 years ago. Self-driving is relatively easy to get, let's say, 80. A lot of driving, especially highway driving, is pretty consistent, and training for it work broadly across different areas. That last 20 is a real meanie, though. I'm ready to bet that in 10 years we may have long-haul drives automated, but it'll be at least 20 years before a truck can reliably navigate from the off-ramp to the endpoint at whatever terminal without human drivers. Story 20. Gauge repair and calibration. Sure, the expensive machinery still has overhaul shops specialized for this work, but the most commonly used gauges can just be bought online cheaper than they can be repaired. Appliance repair took a major hit too. They don't have shops around like they used to. Story 21. Pretty much everything. Large corporations are either taking over or pushing out small businesses. They are too focused on profit. It's toxic. Story 22. As of now, artists doing commissions. They are the first victims of AI. Voice acting was next, but the SAG-AFTRA strike succeeded. Answer. As someone whose job this was for 10 years, I don't know if it's completely AI-driven, but it's the slowest it's ever been. Even though my skill has increased and prices stayed the same, or even dropped, I'm struggling for work nowadays. I have 20K followers on Instagram and Twitter separately. Used to book out for the month, literally in minutes. Thankfully, I have a different job lined up now as this falls apart. But yeah, it's rough out here. Story 23. Truck driving. Certain types of companies and drivers are already getting fiercely squeezed by low prices, especially drayage folks who make quick trips from a port to an area warehouse. Self-driving technology isn't here yet, but some early results show that self-driving vehicles might even be more safe than human drivers. with one of the conflicts being that self-driving vehicles have to account for the lack of safety of human drivers. Wages have dropped, demands continue to rise. The level of observation on drivers is brutal. Don't let your kids grow up to be drivers. Story 24. Marketing. Quietly and in the background. Experienced senior marketers and digital marketers are being made redundant, being replaced by a sub-30K junior with a phone camera, Canva, and ChatGPT. The massive drop in quality of campaign output is not creating a commensurate drop in sales performance, so boards are just not bothering to replace them. Answer: this is true in the sense that marketing is dying, but I wouldn't entirely say that the quality is lower, at least for the well-marketed products. I work in entertainment. Part of my job is coordinating with PR marketing teams for our clients, and I've told my manager to instantly reject any campaign that is, "Oh, listen to my music and follow me because I'm the next Taylor Swift," because it's bland and cliche and doesn't work. However, a different artist of ours, folk indie genre, wanted to do an advocacy-style campaign. During the day, there was a major volunteer event to clean up local parks and trails during the day, and then a show at an outdoor amphitheater that night. Volunteers got in free, others would get tickets. Almost all of the attendees were volunteers. We had a lot of volunteers come help. We broke even on costs from food and drink sales, and the artist's local streaming numbers went up and generated some hype for her brand. Marketing is certainly dying, but I also think it's more of weeding out shoot marketers. Story 25. Wedding dress tuxedo. Stores. The ones around my town have closed down or always have one or two cars. Max and concerning people are more single than ever, along with the economy getting worse every day with no higher wages. People are finding less and less reasons to splurge on their weddings. Story 26. Recruiting. I see the process becoming much more automated every year, and when hiring slows, the recruiters are cut. I also had a phone screen with a virtual AI assistant the other week and can see this happening more in the future. Story 27. Coming from a pastor, churches. Attendance is declining. Local congregations are ignorant or unqualified to meet community needs, are not ashamed to vocalize political preferences without regard to those who suffer, and are too prideful to pass the baton to the next generation. Answer: I think Christians who actually follow the teachings of Christ are a dying breed. There's a terrifying new generation of conservative young people who claim to put faith at the center of their lives, but who actually use their religion as a weapon to hurt others and gain undeserved privilege in society. Certainly, there have been people in every era who used religion this way, but I really believe there had been a waning in their power until this recent resurgence. Community and charity are dying, while those who co-opt the religious aesthetic for selfish ends are thriving. Story 28. Almost all printed media, newspapers, book publishing, magazines, etc., all going the digital route. The companies that switched to digital early are doing the best right now. Story 29. Very slowly, but car dealership. What I experienced when I immigrated a decade ago versus now is vastly different. Back then, pushy sales folks, lying out of their jerk, just slimy vibe overall. Now, just help my dad get an EV1. Here it is, take it or leave it too. Whatever upper hand they had in fuzzing numbers is gone with access to AI on mobile. My dad was against EV for his main car, and he had difficulty grasping what does ChatGPT do. This car buying helped clear it up, especially when I showed him thinking mode. 3. They even just say fudge it when I ask them to price match with CarMax for my trade-in. Story 30. Shopping malls. So many are closing everywhere, I heard at a couple. They are trial running, making them mini housing communities for homeless or low income, because no one can afford a real home anymore, anywhere. Story 31. Any type of ownership. Want to add a movie to your collection? You can only buy and have it stored on the subscription platform servers. Want to buy a car? Well, soon you're only buying the physical car, but to get it to function at all, you have to pay for subscriptions like ignition, heating, acceleration, etc. Want to buy household appliances? Well, to be able to use them, you have to pay a subscription. Want to buy a house? Soon, you can only rent and you'll pay more than what the remaining homeowners pay in monthly mortgages. Water? No longer a public subsidized commodity. You'll have to pay a handful of region-locked monopolies for access to it. We're being microtransaction to hell. I feel like books and music, at least for now, are thriving in physical media where people can still own them. Story 32. Photographers and artists. People really like their AI, and we never allowed their models to train on our work. But fudge it. Answer. Writers too. We didn't agree to have our work scraped by LLMs, we didn't get paid for that, and now we're being chased out of the industry by those very same LLMs who stole our work to copy us more convincingly. Photography is another one I noticed, but mostly because it took me 20 frickin' minutes to disable the embedded AI filters my phone was shoving into the basic camera app. I'm not a professional photographer by any means, but I feel your pain coming from a similar creative industry, especially one that often worked hand in hand before generative AI. Story 33. The music industry. Well, I guess it's not dying per se, but music as we know it is dying for sure, and has been dead for quite a while. Every top 100 hit is all written and produced by the same few people. There are no real bands or artists in the spotlight anymore. It's just people who have the best marketing teams with the most money so that they can sing a few lines that someone else wrote into a mic somewhat half-decently and perform on a multi-million-dollar music video filled with CGI and then call themselves artists. I find it disgusting personally. Answer. Local music scenes are now more important than ever. I feel fortunate that I had older kids around me that started taking me to local shows when I was 15. And I got bit by the bug. I'm now in my late 30s, and of course I still go to tons of big touring acts. But man, I still get a real kick out of just heading to one of my local venues and coughing up 10-15 and seeing some folks I never would have otherwise. Always end up seeing something cool and walking away with some new tunes. Story 34. Private schools. I work in a private school, and every year since COVID our numbers have gone down. When people ask why in meeting, I point out that as a teacher, I couldn't afford to have a kid that goes anywhere but a free school. Makes everyone just a little uncomfortable, and then they agree it must be marketing's fault. Clock is ticking. Story 35. Upper education, more specifically traditional college. People are noticing the time, effort, and money spent on the degree may not be worth it. There's an enrollment cliff post-pandemic that isn't slowing down. Story 36. Stereo equipment. My buddy works at a hi-fi shop in Seattle. I didn't know they still existed, and said his clientele is all aging out and young people don't buy anything but Bluetooth. He even said the vinyl revival we hear about is true, but that like 50 of people who buy it weirdly don't even own a turntable. He thinks in 20 years the stereo industry will be mostly gone. Don't know if it's true, but I haven't had one since I-50 was probably 20. Answer. Have you tried entering a hi-fi shop though? Terrible gatekeeping. You basically have to pass an exam and show all the right signs and signals to make sure you're indeed an audiophile or you're not allowed in. Their condescending is terrible. If you even mention Bluetooth or noise canceling as a convenience, you'll find 2 salespeople start talking about you and your inferiority in your presence. Story 37. Everything that can be done sitting in front of a screen at home. Buy things on Amazon. Order meals from DoorDash. Watch movies on Netflix. See the world and interact with other human beings through various forms of social media. We used to have to go outside to do all these things. Now it's merely optional, and guess what? A lot of people prefer the convenience of home. Welcome to the boring future. Story 38. Print journalism. Feels like it's fading fast, and most people won't notice until it's completely gone. Story 39. Mined diamond industry never thought I would be alive to see the destruction of De Beers. Good riddance. Story 40. Movie stardom. Big names like Robert De Niro, Leo DiCaprio, etc. are not really a thing anymore. Too many influencers and everyone is famous now. Story 41. The fashion industry, due to fast fashion and a race to the bottom and a global standardization of clothing and fashion choice, the diversity and natural beauty of regional styles fell out of favor starting in the 90s and becoming apparent in the 2000s. If you take someone from 2005 and brought them to 2025 wearing the same clothes from back then, they'd look like anyone we'd see in our neighborhood. We don't have the rich styles and diversity that we did from dawn of the Bronze Age to the 2000s. Good job, humanity. The vast majority of us dress like Americans, and worse, have no sense of fashion or cultural pride like we once did. Now it's fast fashion from Shein, Walmart, Target, Aero, Zara, and off-brand clothing. Where once you can tell someone's decade and region, now we all wear clothes that barely change decade to decade. Story 42. Screen printing. Not t-shirts or custom apparel. They're making huge improvements on how to get logos on apparel. Specifically, screen printing is dying. I'd say only really small or really big operations will be left in 5 years. Anybody who was doing printing in a mid-sized shop is done. Answer. My dad had a screen printing business in Houston from 1989-2016. Man, it was fudge badass. Total artist culture hub and local clientele vibes. You'd have a group of young musicians grabbing shirts before their tour, little league coaches grabbing jerseys, and my dad's mushroom-fried salesman who convinced me his brand of cigarettes smelt like skunks. Was 15 when I realized the OL geezer was just always toking a fat doobie. I remember hanging out around the shop when I was around 10, 2005, when the Astros were in the WS. My dad kept huge tabs on the game, as well as have me prepare thousands of tees for print with my grandpa and older brother, because if we happened to win, he could go sell them outside of Minute Maid Park to make enough money for us to finally go to Disney World or some shoot. Man, our jerk got swept. It was such a magical time. He sold the business because my grandma was about to take her journey to the island in the sky, and he wanted my grandpa to retire, but in all honesty, he just couldn't adapt to online branding world that was very much popping off. On top of that, no one was buying Vote for Pedro shirts anymore, and he became quite hard-headed with his art. Conservatism and artistry do not blend well, at least with my dad. He sold the shop for nothing, along with the analog presses and dryers I thought were spaceships as a young kid, and thus I continue to kick myself for not being more savvy when I was in my later teens. Man, you know what? I'm gonna open a fucking screen printing shop. Story 43. One industry that is slowly dying is customer service. A lot of AI software has already been replacing live customer support representatives, ranging from simple number pressing, replacing phone operators, to more complex bots such as those that can chat with you online in company websites. Still, even if a lot of people have already lost their jobs, at the end of the day, I don't believe this industry will completely disappear, because some nuanced issues will really require a human to assist another human, even if some companies do their best to minimize this. Story 44. Art. It's being taken over by AI. Many bands, rappers, and musicians are using AI to create their cover art, videos, and now more recently, songs. Story 45. Art and animation. Multiple disciplines across various media and many different industries at multiple levels, from intern to supervisor director. Eventually, there'll be no creativity. There'll be no art, no amusement, No sense of joy or wonder. Just regurgitated garbage, done at the whim of greed and bullshit. Story 46. CMM programmer. In manufacturing, in many cases parts are measured by CMM. I only know of one person under retirement age who can actually use a print or model to program the measurements. Story 47. Adult beverage. Young people don't drink like previous generations did, and I am happy for them. Those of us in the industry formulate an escape plan now before it's too late. Story 48. While adult content itself is never going away, physical actors are probably on their way out with AI being able to produce realistic videos on demand. Story 49. The industry of pretending. Pretending you're happy. Pretending your job means something. Pretending these pills are healthcare. Pretending these influencers have souls. The industry of plastic connection, where a like is currency, and silence is consent. The industry of dreams for sale, where they manufacture purpose, then lease it back to you with interest, and call it growth. The industry of middlemen. Middle thoughts, middle faith, middle lives, everything diluted, so no one drowns. But no one wakes up either. The slow passing is not an industry. It's a ritual. The offering is truth. The altar is your feed. And the priests are blue-check parasites, selling hope like heroin in a rehab wing. What's dying? The illusion that any of this was ever alive? Story 50. Movie industry lets all admit it. There will be no more creative movies that movie theaters will take a risk on. Story 51. I was a graphic designer most of my career, and then it started merging. And we also had to be copywriters and web designers and SEO experts, etc. Now everything is so automated by AI, it's impossible to get a job in the field. Story 52. Radio. Between endless ads, same 10 songs on repeat, DJs being simulcast from somewhere instead of being local, and the same two companies owning all the stations, it's no shock that people are tuning out. Story 53. Advertising, graphic design-related industry, not because it's out of style or anything. People lost respect for the craft, and so now everywhere you go, you see soulless design in everything, made with AI look shite. Story 54. Strip clubs. Source. Former stripper. Things had already declined by the time I entered the industry, and by 2019, when I exited, things were legitimately fudge grim. Admittedly, I wasn't dancing in a known hotspot, Vegas, Miami, etc., so that environment might be relatively unchanged. But your local strip club in a medium to large city, dying. Why is this happening? Some will lay blame with online adult content or OnlyFans, but I think the answer is a lot more complicated than that. Our cultural relationship to casual intimacy has changed completely. Everyone is broke, and every time I hear, "Why would I want